Hey, I'm Vanessa. I'm from Drift Protocol. I lead product and design, but my background is predominantly in design by trade. Today I'm going to just go through how we're thinking about mobile, why mobile is important to us, as well as some key considerations for those of you who are considering developing on mobile or in the process of doing so. So just in case you don't know anything about Drift, I'll just briefly go over it. Drift is the #1 derivatives DEX on Solana right now. Our V2 has been up for about a year now, and I think we're at about 15 million in daily volume, as well as 600 daily active users. All right, so why mobile? And why is it important to us, and why is it important for us to spend a lot of time thinking about how to deliver a great experience on mobile? Originally for V1, we didn't really have high mobile usage, but in the early days of V2, we actually saw a huge uptick in people requesting a more mobile native experience for them to trade on, and just a more usable mobile experience. But going into mobile is a really big undertaking itself. We started out as predominantly a desktop app. So we used mostly responsive mobile as sort of our beta testing ground to sort of get feedback, learn, put things out there, and get people using it. So what have we learned outside of the fact that people want mobile from us? So 35% of all sessions happen on mobile. That's about 1,000 sessions a day. Earlier in the year, and this also varies month by month, sometimes we're hitting actually 45% of sessions on mobile. So that's over half our sessions per day. And 25% of these sessions are actually longer than 5 minutes. So people are spending time not just looking at balances, not just looking at their positions, they're actually doing things on mobile and using mobile actively. And so our original hypothesis, especially V1 going into V2, was that people were checking balances on the go, checking positions, maybe doing really quick things. But we even have maybe 5 to 10% of mobile sessions being longer than an hour. So that is a really big signal for us. And then as we gather all this data and all of this feedback, we start to see this more emerging segment, which is the mobile native user. Wait, did you say that was you? OK, awesome. And so yeah, a mobile native user, essentially, all that means is that they're just more comfortable on mobile rather than doing things on desktop. We've gotten feedback even though desktop is more of a robust experience, they're just more comfortable on mobile. They'll have it up on desktop, but be entering all of their trades on mobile and having it on the go with them and doing everything predominantly there. And I think this is sort of a trend that we're seeing not just within Web3, but across other industries as well, especially in emerging countries, where you have to make the decision sometimes between desktop and mobile, and they're choosing mobile. That means a lot of people are learning on mobile. They're doing a lot of their firsts on mobile, and that's just where they're going to be natively comfortable. Cool. And so if we just drill into one action, positions being opened and closed, we see that 35% of positions open and closed are actually coming from mobile. And then if we dig just a little bit deeper, we start to see that at least 40% of days for usage of Drift are actually dominated by mobile on some days, but do represent more than 25% of these actions taken. And you'll even see on some days it represents more than 50% of positions opened and closed on mobile, which is a pretty big signal for us, especially during days of volatility. You have news coming out, you want to catch a move, you just want to be able to get in and out as fast as possible. And the easiest way to do that is going to be via your mobile phone. And so that's why with Drift Mobile, the vision there is going to be being able to access Drift anywhere, anytime. That means being able to trade perps and spot on the go, checking your positions on the fly, and earn and explore the app from anywhere. All right, the more applicable version for those of you who are looking to develop your own mobile experiences, I'm going to go into 5 key considerations to sort of get you started. A lot of these are from my one-on-ones with engineers and other designers of how to get started developing your own mobile app and the design aspects that you'll want to take into consideration. So I thought I'd share these 5 with you as sort of that jumping off point to help get you started, to help get you thinking about your mobile experience. The first one, reinventing the wheel. I typically see this, and this is always the first thing that I address with people, is maybe don't reinvent the wheel, especially if you want to move fast. You want to be able to ship something. You want to be able to get something into the hands of your users. So reinventing every single flow, every single experience is probably not going to work well for you and will just really prolong the development time. So you really want to just go as fast as possible. And that just means using tried and true UX patterns and components, as well as UI elements that you know are going to work. And some good places to sort of start if you haven't really delved too deep into mobile development. You have Apple's human interface guidelines. You also have Google's material design. They have a bunch of components there that you can look at. For UX patterns, you can take a look at Mobbin. That's actually my favorite. You basically can pull up any app and see how they're doing a checkout flow, how they're doing onboarding, and you'll just get a huge smattering of what other people are doing, and then you can drill in and see which one is going to fit your use case, your users, and your goals. The next one. So even though I just told you to copy and lift from everybody else, you want to be a special snowflake where it matters. So not everywhere, just in a very few specific areas, ones that are key and core to your industry as well as to your user base. OK, so what do I mean by that? So sometimes the best design decisions for users are not always going to be the trendiest. So up here, I sort of am showing really airy, very spacious, very large type kind of designs that you're going to see throughout a lot of consumer apps. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be right for you. So for example, for traders, you don't necessarily want to have a lot of space. You're trying to consume a lot of information. You're trying to make a lot of decisions. And you want to be able to see as much of that as possible. And mobile is a really tiny space to be able to consume a lot of that information. And then if your app does have any sort of input, you're going to want to remember that the keyboard actually takes up half of the screen. So if you want them to be able to reference something as they're typing something in, those are some of the things you're going to want to think about. So for us, it's tighter spacing, smaller fonts, tighter tap areas, unfortunately, which leads us to the next one, fat fingers. Anything important can be fat-fingered. So you want to be able to just take that in consideration when you're designing for mobile. A lot of people, when they look at desktop, they try to port that same UI and that same experience down to mobile, which means really tiny tap areas, tiny buttons, tiny icons. So you just want to go through and make sure your spacing is large enough. So this typically means 44 pixels for some buttons and icon buttons, down to 36, and then minimum's probably 32. But if you're going to 32 pixels, you're going to want to make sure you have space around it. Me as a designer, I typically redline everything, which is what those red boxes are, and I have a spatial system to help me understand how something is going to look on the screen and make sure that I have appropriate spacing around it, just so that if somebody is tapping and there's a lot of buttons, we're giving it the appropriate breathing room it needs for the user to be able to interact with that without making too many mistakes. The other one you should be aware of is just phone size and thumbability. So phones, from massive phablets all the way to really smaller, tiny mini phones. They all have this sort of area where it's going to be natural for them to interact with one hand. So just think about how you pick up a phone and you're using everything with one thumb. And everything in the green area is probably fair game where you want most of your core actions to be, and that'll be the easiest. And that'll be the fastest for them. If you're going to put core actions out in the red zones, that's where you're going to have to reach quite a bit. And that's when they'll have to drop, the burger that they're holding in their other hand in order to get to that space and be able to interact with that action. So it just becomes a little bit inconvenient and a little bit of a difficult user experience. The fourth one, be a hero and prevent thumb fatigue. What I mean by this is typically endless scrolling. So you see this on Netflix, Instagram, just scroll, scroll, scroll. It's a huge workout for your thumbs. For those of you who are creating apps that actually have actions you want to be able to get users to complete really quickly, you don't want to put anything that they need under the fold. You want to make sure that all critical actions, all critical pieces of information can at least live above the fold. And for those of you who don't really know what the fold is, it's basically where the page cuts off. Some people aren't naturally inclined to scroll all the time, and if you're putting really key pieces of information all the way at the bottom, that just becomes a really cumbersome, difficult UX for people to deal with. The other one is the Whack-A-Mole UX. I don't know if any of you guys have experienced Whack-A-Mole, but it's like a carnival game with a bunch of holes, and like a mole basically pops out, and you're supposed to hit it, and it's a random hole each time. So I use this for UX because I have gone through so many flows where it's like my thumb has to traverse the entire screen. And we sort of saw that heat map of where it's natural for people and where it's painful. So if you keep putting key critical actions at all these different points of the screen, it becomes really difficult for somebody to walk through it. It makes it really easy for them to also mess up whatever it is that they're doing, and also increases the chances that they're just going to bail on whatever that flow is. Where that becomes really important is something like onboarding. So you will see a lot of onboarding patterns that try to shorten that path of success by always having that next confirm button always at the bottom. So those are just some things you'll want to think about as you design different flows. Not just like an informational screen, but basically a step-to-step flow where they need to complete an action all the way at the end. The other thing with this is you just want to decrease the amount of screens. So if you can get it into less than 3 steps, that would be great. It would also help increase your conversion and the amount of people that actually end up at the end. All right, the next one is prioritizing high-value experiences. This one tends to be a little bit difficult depending on where you're starting from. So if you don't have an app yet and you're just going mobile first, it tends to be a little bit easier for you to think about. But if you're starting from a desk app that is like fully featured, it becomes a little bit challenging to think about of what you're going to put down on mobile. A lot of teams tend to just scale down their desktop experience and think that it's going to be OK for mobile, and not really giving time and space for what an actual mobile user is going to need or going to value through that experience. So we obviously started with a desktop app, and then we created more of a mobile-first experience. And I would say anytime you're designing for mobile, it always has to be mobile first. Doesn't matter if you have a desktop app or not. You're going to want to just start from basics. Maybe just start with a hypothesis of what you're going to think the core use case is going to be for your users. So for example, we thought that mobile usage would be mainly checking positions and balances, and that's sort of like where we optimized for things. If we wanted to take our full app, and this is what our information architecture looks like, and that's just a fancy term for all the products and all the pages in our desktop app. If we wanted to take all of this and put it down to mobile, that would honestly take ages, and then having to optimize every single one of these products and every single one of these pages would also be a huge, massive undertaking. And like I said earlier in the talk, you want to be able to ship something faster and get feedback on it faster. And there's also that added uncertainty of like, are they going to need everything? Because not everything you do on desktop is going to translate to what you're going to need to do on mobile. So you do want to be really picky and choosy about what you decide to port over to the mobile experience and to optimize. So taking that original hypothesis, we sort of end up with something like this, which is really pared down. It's really just the trading experience and maybe the portfolio and balances and positions. And that would be the core of what we were trying to target, the core of what we would put out there to get feedback on and to continue to iterate and build up on. And a lot of this just allows us to just get feedback faster and make improvements at a quicker pace. And so this is sort of like a really early iteration of mobile. And it has gone through a lot of iterations, and we've learned quite a bit from it. And progressively start to add more and more based on user demand of what's sort of coming through our community, the feedback that they're giving us, and how we start to layer on other pieces of the product. So it's sort of like we want to be able to start from here and then slowly build up to something that is a little bit more fully fleshed out when it comes to porting the Drift experience onto mobile. This doesn't necessarily map one-to-one, and your mobile experience really shouldn't map one-to-one to your desktop app. It's just going to be what is the core, what do you think is going to be the most important, especially when somebody is on the go. That means paring down features, paring down functionality, paring down the amount of pages and the products that you are putting out there. All right, so really quick summary. The first one, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Be a special snowflake where it matters. Assume everything is important and can be fat-fingered, so give things enough space to interact with. Avoid thumb fatigue by having all the key actions above the fold, and focus on high-value actions and experiences when you're designing for mobile. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.